Good to have you with us on this Friday morning after a busy news week. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to begin with that multi-state manhunt underway for the shooter that killed at least 18 people, hurt 13 more in Lewiston, Maine.
This morning, tens of thousands remain under shelter-in-place orders. Overnight, law enforcement surrounded the last known address of the suspect, Robert Card, but there was no sign of him. That scene, just one area of intense focus. A relative of the 40-year-old suspect tells NBC News that Card has struggled recently with acute mental health issues. Card is a longtime Army reservist who officials say threatened a military base and was sent by his own commanders to a mental health facility in July. Now, as the community reels from the worst mass murder in Maine's history, grief-stricken families are struggling with so much loss.
It's awful. That moment when I got the call that said, Joey's dead. It brought me back. It brought me right back to my knees.
The world lost a great girl, and I lost a precious daughter.
For the very latest, we are joined now by NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton in Lewiston. So, Antonia, first of all, what is the latest on the manhunt for the suspect?
Good morning, guys. Well, law enforcement has fanned out across New England, and we're talking about an investigation that is not only led by the Maine State Police, but is involving federal partners, FBI, ATF, as well as other local law enforcement agencies, and with assistance from states like Massachusetts and New Hampshire here. And that is, of course, because he is on the run, and there is concern that he may not even be in this county or perhaps even in Maine at this point. And so authorities have a kind of wide lens here. We don't know the exact perimeter. And while, you just talked about the search warrants executed last night, we know that authorities are considering the possibility, he owned jet ski, boats. There are multiple ways in which he could have moved. And as many people have discussed here, we know more about both his mental state and his training, his past. He was an Army reservist. He was incredibly proficient in the use of firearms, had been an instructor in some capacity. And so, we're not just talking about anyone on the run here. We're talking about somebody who would very much perhaps have survival skills, have knowledge of the wooded areas throughout Maine. And that is why we are still under a shelter-in-place order here. Businesses are closed. School is out another day, second day in a row. 3 people are still in critical condition behind me here. 3 of the victims passed away in the medical facility here. And so we're in this really heartbreaking and excruciating place, guys, where, the community is starting to grieve, still waiting for the confirmation of the names of some of the victims, but also unable to gather. They can't have vigils. People can't, meet up in public and, process all of this together because we are still in an active threat.
Absolutely. Such a good point. Antonia, tell us also in the aftermath, I know we're learning about the victims. Tell us about them.
Well, NBC News has independently verified 14 of the 18 people who were killed that night. But as I mentioned, 3 other people are still in critical condition, and we're learning from some of the residents who we've had conversations with. I spoke to one woman, a woman who's lived here her entire life, named Cynthia Hunter, who was here at the ER as people were brought in minutes after 7 p.m. as the shootings transpired. And she described seeing people of all ages brought in critical condition here. We know from the 14 that we have identified that they're of mixed genders, ages here. And then we also were learning a bit more about what was happening that night. At the bowling alley, it was youth night. And at the bar and restaurant where the other half of the shooting took place, we know that there was a gathering of deaf cornhole players. And so this has sent shockwaves through the entire community, but it has had an outsized impact on the deaf community here in this part of Maine. And so there's immense grief there and an effort to reach out to families and friends of those who were involved in those tournaments and youth nights to see what kinds of supports they need now. And what we're seeing is people are calling their local radio stations. They're reaching out to each other in groups on Facebook right now because they can't get together in person. And so they're kind of finding ways to communally grieve and talk about their losses, or, really just connect notes about what happened that night in the best ways that they can, guys.
So, Antonia, this shelter-in-place order, which impacts towns and schools up to 50 miles away, any idea how long that's going to stay in place? Will it be until Card is caught?
That's what it's looking like right now, although, there are some hopes from the community that perhaps they'll get some information that will allow them to bring at least school back. It's been devastating for kids who have been stuck at home, living in fear, waiting to hear when they might be able to leave their homes. We've heard from people who say that they've been turning their lights out when the sun goes down at night to make sure that, if Robert Card is out there, he doesn't see their home as a target, doesn't choose to come visit them. They've been locking their barns, locking up their cars. And so, the urgency here is to try to get a little bit of life back to normal, a little bit of community presence here on the ground. But what we've heard from authorities is that so long as there is still this concern of an active threat, that they want people to shelter in place. That's the best information, the best advice they can give people right now. I don't think you can see it behind me here, but all day yesterday, there were officers here who had long guns, and they told us that they were going to have that kind of presence in front of the hospital so long as that active threat was in place, and they felt that they needed the shelter-in-place order here, guys.
Antonia, we can, though, see, and as you just referenced, that you are in front of that hospital. Do we have any more information on those who were injured in this?
Well, we know that 3 people are in critical condition and still receiving care here, although doctors and authorities have declined to comment on the exact profile, on whether any of those people are minors. The community, though, of course, at this point, if you are, of course, a friend or a mom or dad and you haven't seen your loved one, you're starting to get a sense that you may be about to receive some of the worst news, a family could possibly receive. And so the community has been trying to compare their own notes. But we know that 3 people died here that night, that 3 people are still receiving treatment, and that others were sent to other medical facilities around the state, and we expect to receive updates on them soon.
All right, Antonia Hilton in Maine. Antonia, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, as the manhunt continues this morning, we're learning more about the suspect's background. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock is in Bowdoin, Maine with the details.
In Robert Card's hometown of Bowdoin, Maine, area-wide shock.
It's mind-blowing. Everything about it it's unbelievable. I mean, why this is going on and why this happened.
Even as the suspect's own family reveals chilling details about the decades-long Army reservist. His sister-in-law telling NBC News they alerted police and military officials that Card was experiencing an acute mental health episode in the months before Wednesday's massacre, saying he'd been fitted for high-powered hearing aids a couple of months ago and was picking up voices that he had never heard. His mind was twisting them around. The family concerned about the mental state of someone who performs gun training.
And with what we did, meeting him and the way that he showed us how to use a weapon, and then smart. He's really smart. He's tactical.
Former Army reservist Phil Gregory says he learned how to use an M16 rifle from Card. They weren't in the same unit, but the 40-year-old left an impression on Gregory.
He knows warfare. He understands it. He may not have ever been deployed, but he's smart. He knows what to do. I think they need the soldiers, to be honest with you, to be here. I really do.
The assault rifle, believed to be the one used to massacre and maim at least 30 people, was purchased legally in 2023, according to 2 senior law enforcement officials briefed on the matter. And officials tell NBC News Card threatened a military base and was sent by his own commanders to a mental health care facility for 2 weeks of psychiatric treatment in July.
How could someone that fits that profile still be in possession of semi-automatic weapons?
Well, I do think that the statutes around firearms and the possession of those are pretty complex. I know that we will be reviewing that information as we move forward.
Back in Bowdoin, where Card's family has owned land for generations, childhood neighbor Richard Goddard is blindsided.
No one would have seen this coming.
Never expected anything like this to happen here.
There are quite a few new developments seemingly coming in by the hour, including law enforcement saying that a gun was found in that white Subaru. They're checking now to see if it's the same weapon that was used in the mass shootings. At the same time, we're learning that the Card family owns hundreds of acres here as police are scouring the area, with the Card saying that they warned authorities that this is someone who needed help.
All right, Sam Brock, thank you very much. Well, new satellite images of the Gaza Strip show the damage left behind by 3 weeks of airstrikes being carried out by Israeli forces. Here they are on your screen. According to the UN, 42% of homes in Gaza are now uninhabitable. Thousands more have sustained moderate to severe damage.
The death toll in Gaza is also rising. The Hamas-run health ministry says more than 7,000 people in Gaza have been killed. The group also released the names of those victims after President Biden expressed doubt about the validity severity of those numbers.
NBC News correspondent Jay Gray joins us now from Tel Aviv with the latest. Hey, Jay, so in the last few days also, let's talk about what we've seen militarily, these targeted ground raids of Gaza, and the Israel Defense Forces say that they will continue those as they prepare the anticipated larger ground invasion, because this is just these sort of small teams going in. Tell us about what we've seen, and I understand last night there were more of these raids. How do they compare to what we've seen previously in terms of airstrikes?
Yeah, and Savannah, we've seen the strikes from the air, and they do continue, but these are different. Like you talk about, they're bringing tanks and other equipment inside Gaza, crossing the border with Gaza and moving in for what they call targeted raids at specific sites inside Gaza. We know that they've taken out operational structures and some of the anti-tank areas there. And it's clear, and last night seemed to be even larger than the night before as far as the amount of equipment and number of troops that have moved inside. But it's clear that they are clearing the way for, as they say, the next phase of this war, which it appears will be on the ground.
So, Jay, the United Nations set to hold another vote today, this time on a resolution from Jordan. It calls for immediate ceasefire of bombings in Gaza. Comes after almost all Arab countries condemn the attacks on Palestinians. So what did we see in yesterday's session, and do we expect Israel to stop the bombing if the resolution does pass?
Yeah, and look, what the resolution today is going to say is that they want a cessation of all hostilities. They want this thing to end for now. They're going to call for, at the very least, some pauses, humanitarian pauses, to allow more aid into the area, and that, you assume, would include fuel, which isn't going to happen. And you ask if Israel is going to stop. What they have said repeatedly is that they're not going to stop until they rid the world of Hamas. That is what they're saying. And they're saying that any attempt to stop them would be tying their hands. That's quoting the Israeli leaders, tying their hands at protecting the people of Israel.
And Jay, here in the States, family members of the hostages taken by Hamas met on Capitol Hill Thursday afternoon to plead for their release. I want to play a little bit of that first.
We demand not only the U.S., but all of the international community put at its highest agenda, #1 agenda, bringing the hostages back home now.
The United States is the only one who can lead this international effort to make our loved ones come back safely.
So, Jay, that also comes amid news that Russian officials say a delegation from Hamas traveled to Moscow to discuss the release of the hostages. What do we know, first, of course, about the status of those being held in Gaza, just the latest on hostages, but then also what kind of role Russia could play here, why that meeting would have happened?
Yeah, and look, what we know is that there are 224 hostages now. That's the latest number from the IDF. We've heard from the hostages saying they've been treated well while in captivity. You know, Russia has ties to key players here in the Mideast, so they could help facilitate some of this if that's their goal. From the start of all of this, they have blamed a failure of U.S. diplomacy as the reason for the entire crisis.
Jay Gray, thank you very much for your reporting.
As the situation in the Middle East continues, the effects of the war are being felt here in the U.S.
A troubling new report from the Anti-Defamation League found there has been a dramatic increase in anti-Semitic incidents since Hamas's October 7th attack. According to the report, incidents of harassment, vandalism, and assault increased by 388% over the same period from last year.
Let's bring in Oren Siegel for more on this. He is the vice president of the Center on Extremism at the Anti-Defamation League. Thank you for joining us, Oren. So according to this report, there were 312 anti-Semitic incidents between October 7th and 23rd. 190 of those were said to be directly linked to the war in Israel and Gaza. So why is the war having such a huge impact right now? And why are we seeing this just dramatic rise in hate in just the last 3 weeks?
Sure, it's not uncommon for conflict in the Middle East to result in spikes in anti-Semitic activity in this country and other types of hate, in part because of the way that the public discussion, the discussion online is, animating some of these activities. These are assaults, this is harassment, this is vandalism. And at a time where some of the broader discussion around the massacre on October 7th includes people who are glorifying, celebrating, and justifying it. That's why the Jewish community feels vulnerable. And in part, I think that's why we're seeing the spike in incidents here in the U.S. and globally.
We also, Oren, I mean, what's happening on social media is really just startling. The report found that there's been a nearly 1,000% increase in the daily average of violent messages that mention Jews and Israel in these extremist channels online. What role do these online channels play, these platforms, social media, in all of this and in the spread of hate?
Well, we have to understand people's worldviews are often created in these online spaces. So the data that you shared about the threats, those are in some of the darker spaces that the ADL tracks, where we know the types of language and campaigns that are organized there animate real world activity. But frankly, you look at some of the more sort of broader established social media, and so much of what we're seeing there is designed to confuse people or to create anxiety. I mean, it's very hard to get actual information about what's happening during this conflict. And so what social media companies need to do is not allow themselves to be exploited by either extremists who want to incite violence or by those who just want to confuse and disorient the public at a time where they need information that is accurate more than ever.
So we know there are no easy answers or sadly quick solutions, but what are some of the actions you would like to see taken to try and slow the hate, the spread of anti-Semitism?
I think our public discussion, again, whether it's social media or even in our broadcast news, is one about sort of black and white, left and right, Palestinians versus Israelis. And we have to understand that when the conflict occurs and tempers flare, we see hate targeting all communities. And so we actually need to understand that there's sort of a shared mission here in order to push back against the hatred. And you do that by speaking out and not justifying violence, being an ally for others in the community who may be targeted, and, you know, trying to get some cool heads to prevail during a very difficult time.
All right. Oren Siegel, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We do appreciate it.
Important information. Overnight, the Pentagon said U.S. fighter jets hit Iran-backed targets in Syria.
Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said the strikes were, quote, self-defense and that they were in response to a series of recent drone attacks against U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria. NBC's global security reporter Dan DeLuce and our White House correspondent Ali Rafa joined us now to talk about this. Good morning to both of you. Ali, let's start with you. Walk us through what the Pentagon and Austin are saying about these strikes. What are the details we have right now?
Yeah, guys. Well, this was a dramatic retaliation, but also not too surprising considering that since Israel's war with Hamas began on October 7th, we have repeatedly seen White House and Pentagon officials warn any actor, but specifically Iran and its proxy groups, Hamas and Hezbollah, from trying to broaden out this war, from trying to potentially provoke the United States from getting involved and broadening this war out. Defense Department officials saying they won't hesitate to take additional action to protect U.S. forces in this area, saying retaliation would be at the time and place of the U.S.'s choosing. And we saw that retaliation last night. In a statement, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says U.S. military forces conducted self-defense strikes on 2 facilities in eastern Syria used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and affiliated groups, a response to a series of ongoing and mostly unsuccessful attacks against U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria by Iranian-backed militia groups that began on October 17th. Austin saying Iran wants to deny its role in these attacks against our forces. He says we will not let them. So we understand that 2 F-16 fighter jets specifically targeted weapons and ammunition storage areas in this base in Syria. A defense official saying that those were the types of weapons used on U.S. forces in those attacks. The officials say that only Iranian-backed militia, no civilians were on the base at the time, but they don't have a damage assessment or a casualty count at this time. And guys, it's still unclear whether or how Iran will react to this.
Dan, if you could tell us a little bit more about the attacks the U.S. says its forces have come under in the Middle East over these past few weeks that sparked this.
That's right. So there were nearly daily attacks over 10 days against U.S. forces based in Iraq and Syria, and there were a whole number of U.S. forces that suffered minor injuries, and there was an civilian contractor who was sheltering in place during one of the incidents and died of a cardiac arrest. Here's what Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Patrick Ryder had to say about that.
Between October 17 and 26, U.S. and coalition forces have been attacked at least 12 separate times in Iraq, 4 separate times in Syria, by a mix of one-way attack drones and rockets. I'm not going to have more specific information to provide to you from here in terms of specific groups that have claimed responsibility, other than to say we know that these groups are affiliated with Iran.
So that's him describing the injuries that were suffered. And of course, he's not discussing exactly the specific Iranian-backed groups that carried out some of these rocket and drone attacks, but they're making clear that they hold Iran responsible for the actions of those groups.
So, I mean, Ali, we're also hearing from the White House, President Biden sent a message to Iran's supreme leader warning about these recent attacks. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we heard from the president on Wednesday during a speech that he gave with the Australian Prime Minister in the Rose Garden, where he issued a warning to Iran's Ayatollah. And he said, quote, "My warning to the Ayatollah was that if they continue to move against those troops, we will respond and he should be prepared." And John Kirby was asked about that during yesterday's White House press briefing, really how that warning was delivered. He wouldn't give any details, just saying that it was. But the U.S. is being very clear to stress that this was done separate from the U.S. diplomatic posture in the Middle East surrounding the Israel-Hamas war, that this was done as a deterrent. So this is definitely a delicate dance for this White House, this administration, as it tries to defend U.S. forces without potentially provoking a wider conflict in this area, guys.
And Dan, before we let you go quickly, if you could just explain this to us, because it's an important nuance here. The Pentagon is trying to emphasize that these strikes are separate from the Israel-Hamas conflict, but Iran did warn the U.S. over its support for Israel at this UN meeting yesterday. How much of this is about telling Iran to stay out of what's going on in Israel? Is that at play here?
I think it is at play. There's an implication there, but it's also significant to point out that this is not the first time that President Biden has ordered airstrikes against Iranian-backed groups attacking U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. So in the first months of his term in 2021, he ordered airstrikes in a kind of similar sort of a series of incidents, and on another occasion. And it's also important to point out that Biden did not order strikes directly against Iran in Iranian territory. So that shows you that they're trying to calibrate everything. They're desperately trying to avoid a full-blown regional conflict and protect U.S. forces and try to contain the situation, but also send very firm messages to Tehran not to endanger American troops. So I think we may see more of this, and this is a very perilous moment, and we're not out of this crisis.
All right. Dan, Ali, thank you both. Appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.